The soda can didn't hit the floor. It hit a pair of faded blue jeans with a wet thud, then tumbled onto the gleaming white deck of the memorial, leaving a long, sticky trail of amber liquid in its wake. The crowded Pearl Harbor froze, their gasps cutting through the humid Hawaiian afternoon. The man who had been kneeling slowly looked up. Leo Sterling, a 13-year-old in designer sneakers, smirked. His phone was already raised, recording the perfect viral clip. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew exactly who he was targeting. The man was about 50, fair-skinned, with a wave of dark brown hair and a neatly trimmed beard framing his face. He wore a faded plaid shirt, the aforementioned faded jeans, and a pair of old, worn-in boots. His whole appearance screamed simplicity, completely out of place next to the expensive linen suits of the Sterling family. But his expressive brown eyes, even as they narrowed in anger, held a striking familiarity. In that moment, a single act of disrespect wasn't just aimed at an individual. It was aimed at faith, at memory, and it was about to ignite a firestorm that would change a boy, a family, and a nation's understanding of honor. What Leo didn't know was the real reason this man was kneeling here. It had nothing to do with a performance or a publicity stunt. It was a private grief, a blood-deep connection to this very ground. It was a Tuesday afternoon at the USS Arizona Memorial. The sun beat down mercilessly on the sea of visitors gathered around the stark white structure that straddled the sunken battleship. The air was thick with heat and reverence, the kind of quiet that settles over a crowd when something sacred is present. Families, veterans, and tourists stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on the massive marble wall of remembrance, where the names of 177 sailors and Marines were etched for eternity. Among the crowd was the Sterling family from New York. Richard Sterling, a real estate mogul, was dressed in an expensive linen suit, his eyes glued to his phone as he fired off emails. His wife, Clarice, fanned herself languidly with a designer paper fan. Between them stood their 13-year-old son, Leo. His blonde hair was perfectly gelled, and his outfit screamed money. Leo wasn't here for reverence. He was here because his parents thought a trip to Pearl Harbor would look substantive on their social media feed, and he had just spotted a gold mine for content. "Look," Leo whispered, nudging his mother. "That guy in the plaid shirt, doesn't he look familiar?" He zoomed in with his phone camera. "No way. He looks just like that actor from the religious show my grandmother watches." Clarice glanced over her sunglasses. "Oh, he does have a resemblance. Just a look-alike, I'm sure." Richard didn't even look up. "Leave the man alone. Focus on the tour." But Leo didn't think it was a look-alike. He was sure it was him. He'd seen that face on billboards everywhere, and a malicious thought sparked in his mind, a man famous for playing a holy figure. Now here in this hallowed place, it had to be an act. The man, Jonathan, was oblivious to the scrutiny. He was scanning the endless sea of names for a single one. Roumie, J., his great-grandfather, a young sailor who had gone down with the ship on December 7th, 1941. He had come here quietly, with no entourage, no press, simply for a private moment at his ancestors' final resting place. After a few minutes of silent reflection, Jonathan slowly lowered himself to one knee. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was an instinctive act of respect and sorrow. His ungloved hand tightened around an old, worn rosary he always carried. His eyes closed in a silent prayer. For Leo, this was the proof he needed, a perfect performance. "Oh my God, look!" Leo's voice dripped with sarcasm into the video he was now recording. "He's really getting into character, kneeling and praying like he's on a movie set. So fake." He chuckled, then spoke louder, deliberately letting those around him hear. Hey, buddy, are you praying for the souls down there or for your next movie to make more money? A few tourists turned to glare at him, and whispers of disapproval began to ripple through the crowd. A Navy security petty officer standing nearby frowned, his attention now fixed on the boy. But Leo didn't care. He was used to being the center of attention. To escalate the drama, Leo decided on a bolder move. He saw the half-empty soda can in his hand. A wicked grin spread across his face. "This shot is gonna make my video blow up," he muttered. And then he tossed it. The can hit Jonathan squarely on the leg. The sticky liquid soiled his jeans and spattered onto the rosary clutched in his hand. Jonathan's eyes snapped open. The prayer was broken. The sacred moment defiled. A slow, burning anger began to rise within him, a righteous anger he'd had to suppress too many times in his public life. But this was his great-grandfather's grave. This was the line. He slowly rose to his feet, turning to face Leo. His expression was calm, but his eyes, now stripped of their sunglasses, were blazing. Leo, far from being intimidated, was ecstatic. "Oh, he's mad now. Yo, check it out. I just pissed off a holy man." He raised his phone again, zooming in on the stain. "You need me to perform a miracle to clean that up for you." An elderly man in the crowd, wearing a Navy veteran's cap, could no longer contain himself. "Hey, kid, shut your mouth and show some respect." Richard Sterling finally looked up, annoyed. "Hey, old man, don't yell at my son." He turned to Leo, his tone still dismissive. "Leo, that's enough. Get back here." "Relax, Dad," Leo said, waving him off. "I'm just exposing a hypocrite." And then Leo, undeterred, did something no one expected. He brazenly stepped over the symbolic chain barrier. The crowd gasped in outrage. The Navy security personnel started moving toward him, but it was too late. Leo swaggered right up to Jonathan, holding his phone high for a selfie, trying to capture the man's angry face in the frame. Yo, me and the world's holiest actor, faking some redemption at Pearl Harbor. This is gonna get 1 million likes. That was the final straw. The self-control of a public figure, drilled into Jonathan through years of scrutiny, screamed at him to back away, to call security, but something more primal, more personal, took over. The insult to his family, the desecration of his faith, the flagrant violation of his grief. In a single, fluid motion, faster than anyone could have anticipated, Jonathan stepped forward. He said nothing. His hand shot out and snatched the phone from Leo's grasp. And before the stunned crowd, he threw it hard onto the marble deck. The crack of the screen shattering echoed like a gunshot, silencing every other sound at the memorial. Leo's jaw dropped, his eyes wide with disbelief. You broke my phone!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "That's a $2,000 phone, you're going to pay for that." Before Jonathan could respond, 2 uniformed Navy security officers arrived, their expressions grim. "Sir, what's going on here?" The lead officer, Petty Officer Davis, asked, his voice calm but firm. Richard Sterling stormed forward, his face a mask of crimson rage. He shoved past the officer and got right in Jonathan's face. "Pay for it! He's going to do more than pay for it! This is assault, destruction of property. I'll have your career. Do you have any idea who I am?" "Sir, I need you to step back," Davis said, putting a hand on Richard's chest. Richard slapped it away. "Don't you touch me! My son was just having some fun, and this actor attacked him." "Your son crossed a restricted barrier and assaulted a civilian, sir," Davis stated flatly, gesturing to the wet stain on Jonathan's jeans. "We have dozens of witnesses." Clarice rushed to Leo's side, clutching her pearls. "He's just a child. You can't treat him like a criminal. This man, he's unstable. Richard leaned in close to Jonathan, his voice a venomous whisper that only Jonathan and the officer could hear. I'm going to ruin you. A name like Roumie. I should have known. You people are all the same. Hot-headed and violent. The insult, so personal and laced with prejudice, hit Jonathan harder than the soda can. It wasn't just about a spoiled kid anymore. This was something darker. That's enough, Petty Officer Davis said, his tone now ice. We're escorting you and your family to the security office. Now. As the Sterlings were led away, protesting loudly, Richard was already on his new phone, not to his lawyer, but to his PR fixer. I don't care what it costs, he snarled into the receiver. Find everything on this Jonathan Roumie, his family, his past, any dirt you can find. I want him buried by morning. Jonathan stood alone, the broken phone at his feet. The crowd was a blur of faces, some sympathetic, some filming. He felt a cold dread wash over him. He hadn't just reacted to a boy's prank. He had stepped into the ring with a monster. The attack came faster and more viciously than he could have imagined. By the time he was back in his hotel room, the first story had already dropped on a major conservative news blog, a publication known to be friendly with Richard Sterling. The headline was brutal. Beloved actor's violent and erratic outburst at Sacred National Memorial. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination. It painted Jonathan as an aggressive and unstable figure, using his quiet faith against him by suggesting it was all a fragile public persona. It conveniently omitted Leo's provocations, but highlighted the shattered phone. And then came the poison dart. Expertly placed, sources close to the Sterling family expressed concern over Roumie's temperament, speculating that his Middle Eastern heritage may contribute to a volatility unsuited for a public figure representing such wholesome American values. The internet exploded. The narrative was set. He was no longer the victim, he was the aggressor, a volatile foreigner who desecrated a sacred American site. His agent called, panicked. The studio behind his new project released a statement saying they were monitoring the situation. An endorsement deal for a family-friendly brand was put on hold indefinitely. In the span of 3 hours, the powerful, unseen machinery of wealth and influence had been turned against him, and Jonathan Roumie was watching his life's work and reputation burn to the ground on live television. He was trapped, isolated, and utterly powerless. The next 24 hours were a living hell. Jonathan was holed up in his hotel room, watching his world unravel. Every major news network was running the story, debating his meltdown. The hate mail and threats flooded his social media, a vile torrent of racism and vitriol. He was advised by his team to remain silent, but silence felt like an admission of guilt. He felt the weight of the Sterling Empire crushing him, and for the first time, he felt a profound, chilling despair. He had lost. Meanwhile, in a quiet suburban home in Ewa Beach, a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer named Frank Tanaka was watching the news, his face growing darker with every report. Frank had been at the memorial. He had seen everything, and he was disgusted by the lies being spun. "They're crucifying him," Frank muttered to his granddaughter, a tech-savvy 16-year-old named Maya. "It's awful. Grandpa," she said, scrolling through her phone. "Everyone thinks he's a monster." Frank looked down at his own phone. He had recorded the entire incident, not just for the spectacle, but because he had a gut feeling that the rich, arrogant family would try to twist the story. His recording was shaky, but it was complete. It showed Leo's sneering taunts, the deliberate mockery of Jonathan's prayer, the soda can hitting its mark. And it had captured the most damning part of all. The audio was crystal clear as Richard Sterling leaned in and spat his poison. A name like Roumie. I should have known. You people are all the same, hot-headed and violent.
Maya, Frank said, his voice firm with purpose, I need you to help me put this online. The whole thing, no cuts.
Maya's eyes lit up. She took his phone and, within minutes, uploaded the full, unedited 10-minute video to YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok with a simple, powerful title, The Truth at the USS Arizona Memorial. For the first few hours, it was a drop in the ocean. Then, a popular veterans advocacy group found it and shared it. From there, it went supernova. The internet, which had so eagerly condemned Jonathan, now watched in horror at the full context. They saw Leo's cruelty. They saw Jonathan's restraint. And most of all, they heard Richard Sterling's naked, ugly bigotry. The tide turned with the force of a tsunami. The hashtag Dr. Jonathan Roumie Violent was completely replaced by Jock Justice for Jonathan and Dr. Sterling Exposed. The public outrage was no longer directed at the actor, but squarely at the billionaire and his family. The fallout for the Sterlings was swift and brutal. It was a public execution by 1,000 cuts. A news chyron announced that Sterling Properties stock had plummeted 30% in a single day. Another clip showed a prominent politician, a longtime recipient of Sterling's donations, publicly denouncing him and returning the money. A press release from his company's board of directors announced they had called an emergency meeting to discuss Mr. Sterling's future leadership. By the end of the week, Richard Sterling was forced to resign in disgrace from the company he had built. Business partners abandoned him. The charities his wife sat on the board of quietly removed her name from their letterheads. Their social circle evaporated. Their perfect, powerful world had been shattered by the truth, captured on a veteran's old smartphone in his hotel room. Jonathan watched as the Navy issued a formal apology for the distress he had endured at their memorial. His agent called, voice filled with relief, telling him the studio was now fast-tracking his project and doubling down on their support. He released a single, simple statement. Truth and prayer are powerful forces. I hold no ill will and pray for the family, that they might find peace. Miles away, in a cold, silent New York penthouse, Leo Sterling watched his father on the news, a broken, ranting man no one was listening to anymore. He scrolled through a new phone, seeing the tidal wave of hatred directed at his family a mirror of the hate he had so casually dished out just days before. He looked at his reflection in the dark screen, and for the first time, the smirking, arrogant boy was gone. In his place was a child, staring at the ugly, rotten core of his inheritance, finally learning the brutal cost of disrespect. Thank you for following this story. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. If you'd like more inspiring stories about justice and resilience, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'll be back tomorrow with another must-see story you won't want to miss. The video, titled The Truth at the USS Arizona Memorial, was a drop in the ocean at first. For hours, it garnered only a handful of views. Then, a popular veterans advocacy group found it and shared it with a simple caption, "This is what honor looks like, and this is what bigotry sounds like." From there, it went supernova. The internet, which had so eagerly condemned Jonathan, now watched in horror at the full context. They saw Leo's cruel, sneering taunts. They saw Jonathan's quiet prayer, his pained restraint. They saw the soda can hit its mark. And most of all, they heard Richard Sterling's naked, ugly bigotry, the words echoing with a chilling clarity. The tide turned with the force of a tsunami. The hashtag Jonathan Roumie Violent was completely replaced by Buck Justice for Jonathan and Sterling Exposed. The public outrage was no longer directed at the actor, but squarely at the billionaire and his family. The news blog that had first published the attack piece quietly deleted their article. But it was too late. Screenshots were everywhere. The fallout for the Sterlings was swift and brutal. It was a public execution by 1,000 digital cuts. The first to fall was Richard Sterling's empire. A news chyron announced that Sterling Properties stock had plummeted 30% in a single day as investors fled. Another clip showed a prominent politician, a longtime recipient of Sterling's donations, publicly denouncing him and vowing to donate the funds to an anti-defamation league. A press release from his company's board of directors announced they had called an emergency meeting to discuss Mr. Sterling's future leadership. By the end of the week, Richard Sterling was forced to resign in disgrace from the company he had built. His business partners abandoned him. The elite charities his wife sat on the board of quietly removed her name from their letterheads. Their exclusive country club membership was under review. Their perfect, powerful world had been shattered by the truth, captured on a veteran's old smartphone. In his hotel room, Jonathan watched as the United States Navy issued a formal apology for the distress he had endured at their memorial and announced that Petty Officer Davis was being commended for his professionalism. His agent called, his voice filled with relief, telling him the studio was now fast-tracking his project and doubling down on their support. The family-friendly brand that had put his deal on hold was now begging to run a new campaign centered on integrity and grace under pressure. He didn't accept. Instead, he did two things. First, he tracked down Frank Tanaka. They met for coffee. Two men from different generations bonded by an unexpected event. Jonathan listened as Frank spoke not of anger, but of duty, the duty to defend the truth. Jonathan thanked him, not just for the video, but for reminding him that good people still exist. Second, he released a single, simple statement to the press. It read, "Truth and prayer are powerful forces. I hold no ill will and pray for the Sterling family, that they might find peace and understanding." Miles away, in a cold, silent New York penthouse, Leo Sterling watched his father on the news. A broken, ranting man no one was listening to anymore. He scrolled through a new phone, seeing the tidal wave of hatred directed at his family, a perfect mirror of the hate he had so casually dished out just days before. He looked at his reflection in the dark screen, and for the first time, the smirking, arrogant boy was gone. In his place was a child, staring at the ugly, rotten core of his inheritance, finally learning the brutal cost of disrespect. The shattered phone on the deck of the USS Arizona was nothing compared to the shattered lives surrounding him now, and it was a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. Thank you for following this story. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. If you'd like more inspiring stories about justice and resilience, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'll be back tomorrow with another must-see story you won't want to miss.